أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي صدق الله العلي العظيم. Okay, so today we continue with the sixth session in our series of 8 lessons on the learnings that we take from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Right, so to continue from where we left off in the last session we completed the Prophet Musa Alayhi Salam. And we did say that he was married to Safura and he had an older brother called Harun. So Harun and Musa were the two brothers of the son of Imran. Now, Imran is not to be confused with this Imran that we're going to come study later on. So we'll continue with the story of Harun, and thereafter we'll go on to the descendants of Abraham, Yaqub, and Yusuf, who were Dawud and Sulaiman, the two sons of the progeny of Yaqub alayhi salam. And then we'll go on to Kifl, who's a kind of a standalone, and I'm not sure which line he descends from, but invariably all lines lead to Adam alayhi salam. Then we have another line here, which is Yunus alayhi salam, also not linked to Dawud or Sulaiman in a direct way, but still basically still part of the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And on this side we have two other prophets that are mentioned just in passing, just about 2 or 3 ayah on each of them, were the sons of Harun, both Ilyas and Al-Yasa. So let's see how far we can get if we can complete these 6 that I've highlighted today. Okay, so we started with Harun or Aaron. He lived for about 120 years. He was in the area of Egypt and Canaan, like Musa alayhi salam. He was the elder brother of Musa, and Allah allowed him to accompany Musa when they went to Pharaoh to tell him to stop his ways and to preach a message of subservience, as well as to release the Banu Israel from bondage. And Harun happened to be the more eloquent of the two, because Musa alayhi salam also had a bit of a speech defect as well, so he used to stutter a little. So the two of them together were like helping each other when they approached Pharaoh. So when Musa alayhi salam went up Mount Sinai, he left Harun to look after the people. And during that departure of his for something like 40 days or so, people started now looking at people around them and saying, you know, others have got an idol, why don't we also make one? And they approached this person called Samiri. And the Samiri actually used the gold that everybody had in their possession, melted it, and created what was the image of a cow with the hollow sound as the wind blew through it. And this became like the new god that the people of the Banu Israel started believing in the absence of Musa, who went up to Mount Sinai. Now, this is all what we know about Harun alayhi salam. But he was chastised by Musa when he came back from Mount Sinai to say, why did you allow them to do this? And he couldn't actually answer that question totally, but nevertheless, this is what happened. So that's what we know about Harun alayhi salam. Then we move on to Dhul Kifl. Now, Dhu means the possessor of, and Kifl is a fold. Now, Dhun Nurain was a title given to Hazrat Uthman because he was the possessor of 2 lights. He married 2 of the daughters of the Prophet. So Dhu just simply means the possessor of, right? So it's not actually a name, but it's just a title, as it were. Now, he was sent to the people of Armonia, and in the Atlas of Islam, I couldn't actually find this people in any of the history that I tried to check on, as well as in terms of the atlas, there's no map given about where he was located per se. So we'll leave that out for now, but essentially there were 2 mentions of him in the Quran. Now, a few things about him. He fasted during the day, almost every day. He worshipped at night. He never lost his temper and was a very good judge amongst his people. And these are the 2 ayat. So the first one talks about Ismail, Idris, and Dhul Kifl, and they had one quality in common. They were minas sabirin. Now, sabr, we know, is the one who has patience. And in the case of the prophets, they had patience to the extreme because they were faced with people that were totally in denial and did not want to accept the message of subservience, and therefore they required extraordinary sabr, and Kifl was given, like Ismail Idris, others, this quality of sabr. Then the other ayah that talks about them is that he mentioned, in this one, they mention Ismail, Yasa, and Zulkifl, and they were minal akhyar. Now, khair, we know it means good. As-salatu khairun min al-nawm, that salah is better than sleep. So, akhyar is like the superlative form. They were among the best of the best, or the elect group of them, or the most chosen ones of the prophets. So, the context is simply there that they were one of the best chosen people to deliver the message of Allah to the people they were sent to. Now, this first ayah I read was even mentioned earlier when we mentioned Idris alayhi salam, who came after Adam alayhi salam and before Noah. He was also mentioned to be in this ayah that Kullum min as-sabirin. Okay. Also, there are other qualities that we mentioned of Idris, whether he was Siddiq and Nabi. Okay, we then move on to Dawud alayhi salam. Now, we all know him as David or King David. Now, at the time when he was still a youngster, King Talut was in charge of the people in that area, and no one wanted to actually fight against him. So they asked for volunteers, and young Dawud volunteered. He was still a youngster at the time to take on this giant Jalut, and all he had in his arsenal of weapons was a little sling and a slingshot. So in other words, he put a little stone in there, pull that ribbon, pull the elastic the way it could, and then he flung the thing, and this is what we know to be David's sling, or the shot that killed Jalut, because Jalut was wearing armor, and the only place he could penetrate was through the eyes. And Dawud was such a very good with the slingshot that he actually killed Jalut as a result of being able to penetrate in the one weak point in the armor that King Talut actually had on. So Dawud became the king after King Talut passed away, and he was known for having two qualities: lots of wisdom and lots of knowledge as well. He was also a very pious man. He fasted every second day. He prayed a third of the night of every night. And he was given a unique gift of molding iron into light armor, through which he made his livelihood. In this way, he didn't have to burden the treasury to secure an income. He did a bit of work on the side that, catered for his livelihood. Now, the Bible has fabricated stories about Prophet Dawud, accusing him of theft, adultery, and plotting a murder. Now, all we say is, Na'udhu Billah, how we seek protection from anybody even uttering such blasphemy against any of these prophets, and Prophet Dawud included. So, how the Bible or even people mention these bad qualities in the man as select as a prophet, because he was also from the Akhyar, the one that was chosen and selected by Allah to preach a message, and a divine message at that. So we don't say that, in no way in the Quran does it mention any of these ill qualities for any of the prophets. Now, if you look at the map on the side, Dawud alayhi salam essentially lived in this place between Palestine and Adun. So between Jerusalem, Beit Dajan, Ramallah, Abu Ghush, and Bethlehem and Hebron. So these are the towns that he kind of lived in, and he preached within. Right, now, his judging ability was tested one day when two men scaled the wall to his sanctuary where he was, where he lived as well as where he prayed, and asked Dawood to urgently judge on a matter. Now, he was a bit scared when these guys came jumping over the fence and demanding an answer. So, in any case, the story goes that from the two men, one man had 99 sheep and the other one had one. And the richer, that one who had 99, wanted the other one also from this one person, the other one that had only one. Now, Dawud gave a verdict on the side of the person who owned the one sheep without taking cognizance of the full matter before pronouncing his judgment. Now, this was just a test from Allah. And after they had left and he gave this decision, he thought about the matter, and that's when he realized that the poor man may have tried to gain sympathy due to his condition, the fact that he had only one sheep, so he was pleading like poverty, and that sort of maybe drew more sympathy for his cause. But on the other hand, the richer person may have had a legitimate claim to the one sheep he did not own. He had 99, but even the other one perhaps legitimately was actually his. So when Dawud thought about this carefully, and there was, other nuances to this case, then he realized he made a mistake, he realized an error, and he asked for forgiveness from Allah for not gathering all the evidence and being swayed by appearances before passing judgment. So from this we learn that in life we should also be careful not to be swayed by appearances, especially when we don't know the full story behind what appears to our naked eyes. It's also a very good habit to pause, reflect on the situation that's at hand, ask for clarity if we're not sure, consult with others who might be wiser than us, and then take a sort of consultative decision about a matter. Now, the same goes with social media. Don't just fall into the trap of forwarding any messages without verifying its authenticity. And also when receiving a harsh email, sometimes we're so angry when we receive this email that we want to just go into and reply to that email immediately. But the advice here is don't reply immediately. Sleep over the matter. And after a day or two, when the mind is clear, then, and after reflection on the matter at hand, then you respond by email as a response to the person who was harsh to you. So make the intention at all times that Allah must guide us in the decisions we make, the words we use, and also how we express ourselves, because every word we utter, we're going to be answerable for it one day. Right, then there was another judgment that came to Dawud alayhi salam. Two men came with another case, and Dawud's son Sulaiman was 11 years old at the time, listening to the merits as presented. So the one man said he was the owner of a field whose grapes were eaten by the sheep of the owner next door. Now he sought compensation for that loss. So after confirming this had happened, Dawud decreed that the man's sheep be given in exchange for the loss of grapes. So on the surface of things, it looks like an equal thing, like for like. You lost grapes, I lose sheep, and end of story. Now, young Sulaiman offered a better solution. He said the owner of the sheep should take temporary ownership of the field to cultivate the grapes till they are grown. And the other person can use the sheep's wool and milk till the field is repaired. Now, if the grapes grow and the field returns to its original state, then the field owner takes back his field and gives the sheep back to its owner. Now, Dawud accepted his son's judgment as a better outcome. Now, imagine a young boy telling his father, who is a learned, wise, knowledgeable man and a good judge, of an alternative way of interpreting this case and finding a more sort of just and equitable solution, which it really was. So it's something that we take a lesson from that as well. Also, in the life of Dawud, he was given the divine revelation called the Psalms. We know it as the Zabur. So it's another book or set of tablets that were given to him by way of revelation from Allah directly. And the other important thing that when Dawud passed away, his son Sulaiman alayhi salam asked the birds to shield the mourners like a cloud cover under until Dawud was laid to rest. So from this incident, we learn that even though the father was a respected and wise judge, he took the advice of others, no matter how young they were. Also, he did not take offense at being guided by a simple 11-year-old child, as it were, and he displayed humility, which is a true sign of those who are wise. So being humble and open to criticism takes you far in life and earns you the respect in the long term. Okay, we then move on to Sulaiman alayhi salam. Now, he lived in the same area like his father Dawud. If you look at the towns are similar here, there's just one new name that comes in here, which is Asqalan, which is the Valley of the Ants. One day his army was crossing this area, and the ants actually spoke to the other ants saying, you know what, beware, Sulaiman is coming with his army and they're going to trample all over us, so go into your shelters and disappear from this oncoming army. And obviously, because Sulaiman was able to hear them speak, he actually made a dua on that occasion, and we'll come to it just now. So this is one part. So there's one extra sort of piece in a map that belongs to Sulaiman in particular, and the other one is this insert, which we've got from Yemen to Jerusalem, Queen Bilqis's story. She was the queen of Sheba, or queen of Saba, and she ruled over the people of Yemen at the time, and there was correspondence between Sulaiman in Jerusalem and she based in Yemen, and we'll talk about that also just now. So Sulaiman happened to be the youngest son of Dawud, the third king in terms of the kings of Israel. Many unique gifts were given to Sulaiman by Allah. Now, he had unique powers. First of all, the power to speak to animals, birds, and insects. Secondly, he had control over the winds. And the third unique thing he had is he could rule over jinns. In other words, he could command them to do things for him. Right? And also he made the dua that he must be given a kingdom that no one ever had control over before him. Such a wide, vast expanse over nature and the jinn that no one else had that power over those other creations. And that's what happened in his life. Uh, he only lived for about 40 years, as we see here, so it's a very short lifespan. Now, he turned out to be a very wise king and a noble prophet. He inherited his father's dominion and knowledge. Also, he had humility and the kind of stuff that, the ni'mats that he was given or blessed with, had it been given to anybody else, that person would have probably boasted in arrogance about his abilities and his good fortune. But uh, Nabi Sulaiman, Prophet Sulaiman, was humble. He accepted the fact that he came from Allah and that it can be taken away anytime from Allah as well. So he was able to handle these special gifts that were given to Allah to him. Now, his story, some of these are mentioned in the Quran. Sulaiman loved horses, and on one occasion he was inspecting all the horses at the time of Asr Salah, and he missed the Salah in the process, and returned asking for forgiveness for this lapse. Right, so that's one incident. Then another one happened. He asked for this dominion that no one else had, and he was given the power of controlling winds, so he could actually steer ships and make them move faster or slower depending on where he wanted to travel, and he could travel wherever he pleased on the waters. Then also he had the command over the jinn, and this included them being told to build whatever he wanted built. Right? And they could secure from the depths of the sea right down at the bottom of the seabed or from lands far away any resources he needed, whether it was iron, steel, glass, whatever. He could secure whatever he wanted. So on one occasion, he heard the ants advising others to move away before Suleiman and his entourage crushed them, to which he smiled and he made this dua, "O Allah, make me grateful for what you have bestowed on me and my parents. Allow me to be righteous as you approve, and admit me to your mercy." Now, this is a very beautiful dua. We should all learn this, and because it's asking a few things. One is about gratitude, that hamd and shukr that we've talked of many, many times, and also for all the ni'mats that you've bestowed on me and my parents, and also for my parents, and allow me to be righteous. In other words, have taqwa all throughout my life as you approve, and also admit me into your mercy. So beautiful dua, asking for 4 important things that we should always ask for in our duas. Also, from this dua, we learn that let me be of service and have good deeds. And also, in this occasion, obviously, he avoided doing harm to the ants because they had asked, they were talking among each other to move away so that Suleiman could pass. Now, Ascalon became that area, and it was named the city of ants as a result of this particular incident. Right, so what we learn from these little 3 or 4 incidences are don't let any of our interests or hobbies or sports or businesses or family responsibilities hinder us from performing salah on time. This is very important that in life we do our life around salah, not let life lead us, and salah is like taken as a backseat or done when we have time, and we make excuses for not having done it, but yet other things get done. So let us have our priorities straight. Salah comes first, and all our hobbies, our sports, our interests, our businesses, everything else comes secondary to salah in life. Also, wanting the best and making dua for it. There's no harm in that. So all our dua should be positive, asking for things that we want. And if you are granted it, then use it judiciously and wisely. Don't hoard it, but don't be extravagant in the way you spend from what Allah has blessed you with as well. Then also about how to protect nature and the environment around us. We shouldn't abuse it. So if we own a farm, we shouldn't overgraze or overplant or damage the soil to the point that there can be no further harvest or no further grazing. Likewise, if we own a mine, we shouldn't overmine as well, just because we're motivated by greed. And we need to aim for sustainability at all times and transparency and accountability. Now, today, the buzzword in boardrooms in the corporate world is about ESG, which is environment, sustainability, and governance. And here we see in Sulaiman's life an element of it that we need to also build that into our life and livelihoods that we pursue. Also, we can take a lesson from, the Red Indian, the Aborigine Indians of America. They used to, whenever they used to hunt for food for their family or for their tribe, they would hunt only one buffalo or one animal that their family needed for that day or would last the next 1 or 2 or 3 days at the most, because they didn't have refrigeration and all the rest of it. So they would hunt only to the extent that their family needed the food. Likewise, when they went to fish, they used to only catch like either one big fish or a few small fish enough to feed them for the day. And after eating that fish or making that fire in nature to roast that meat or whatever, the next day they would ensure that all the embers of the flames that were maybe still came over to the next morning, they would ensure that all that is obliterated from the face of the earth. In other words, it's hidden, it's covered, so there's no traces of the fact that the fire was made there the previous night or the previous day. So they led a life in such a way that it's described as it's how if you look at a fish and how it moves through water, it leaves nothing behind it. There's no like chimney of obnoxious smoke coming out from an exhaust pipe behind the car that we drive. The fish moves, glides through water so effortlessly and seamlessly, and it doesn't leave a trace of where it went. In other words, we'll never know the path that fish took in the water. And this was the philosophy with which the Red Indians loved and abided by. So this is great things that we can learn even from other communities and good wisdoms that come through even from the Red Indians in America, sometimes Aborigines in Australia and everywhere else. The natives of the land know the land best, and they built in this nature, this conservation of nature and looking after nature and only using what we needed out of nature, not abusing it, not overkilling, and not mass producing and going into big industries and all that kind of stuff. So automation and like that sausage making machine was not in their culture. They just lived for the day, and they lived peacefully and happily and looked forward to the next day and lived a very healthy life as well in that better. Right, so the other thing that was a gift that given to Sulaiman was he could communicate with birds. And on one occasion, he noticed one of the hoopoe birds, there's a picture there, he was not present. And due to his concern for each of his subjects, he even regarded the birds as a subject, he inquired about where was this hoopoe. So a little while later, this bird came with the knowledge from a kingdom far away from Sabah, of which they weren't even aware that there was such a kingdom, where there was a queen in power, and all of its people were worshipping the sun. They were sun worshippers. So the bird mentioned that what a magnificent throne the queen had, to which Sulaiman asked the jinn to take a letter to her, inviting her to Islam or to submission. So on receiving this letter, she asked her generals, who were like a powerful army, what should they do in response? And they replied to her, they said, you know what, we have the power to subdue Sulaiman. We don't know who he is, but we can go there with our army to wherever he is, and we can subdue him, and we can overpower him. So to which she listened to them, but she applied her own mind, and she said, you know what, let me choose to rather meet him personally. And her view was that peace and friendship is better than just going out to war. Right? So she sent, in response to his gift, she sent another gift to Suleiman in exchange. Now Suleiman readied his army to show his strength to envoys that brought this gift, but on receiving this gift, he realized that she was willing to at least meet him, and therefore the meeting happened. Now, if you look at the hoopoe bird, this is one of those big, very small but migratory birds. And it lives in one variety, the Eurasian hoopoe, with the crest is low. The crest is normally, it looks like an image on the head. The hoopoe happens to be occupied Palestine's national bird. Right now, we know why that is, because Sulaiman, King Solomon, is one of the important sort of kings of Israel today. And the Hupu itself, the amazing thing about it, if you look at Yemen and where Jerusalem is, it's a distance of 2,200 kilometers apart. Now imagine a bird can travel this kind of journey going from Sulaiman alayhi salam, where he was based in Jerusalem, going all the way to Yemen, getting this information, and then flying all the way back to Jerusalem to give him the message. Now, this is an amazing feat of some of Allah's creations. And according to the migrationatlas.org, that website, interesting to read, there are some small birds that can do this kind of distances. In the case of the whoop, I'm not sure if I don't know if it's done in one flight, but there are certain smaller birds in this that can do longer flights than even 2,200 kilometers in one go. Now, this is mind-boggling, to think how can a small bird that can fit in the palm of your hand survive airborne without eating and drinking on a journey that long. Now, 2,200 kilometers is like if you're flying from Johannesburg to Cape Town is 1,500 kilometers, and then you're coming back to say halfway to between Beaufort West and Bloemfontein. It's that kind of a journey that a bird is making kind of on its own or sometimes in a group, like in a flock, right? In a group of birds that fly and make this journey. So it's something to think about, that what an amazing creature Allah is. He's got the power of not only creating, but even sustaining, ability to, fly a distance and survive without food, water for such long periods. And obviously dealing with the elements along the way, because there's sometimes rains and winds and all the rest of it. Nature's elements also play havoc on all these migratory birds. So a lot of them die also in the process, but alhamdulillah, many of them survive, and today we can appreciate this one creature, the bird. Okay, then we move on to what we learned from this occasion, that when blessed with any bounty, skill, or expertise, right, and some of us have, good skill, good business acumen, whatever expertise we have, all of us must use these things wisely, and very important for the benefit of others. Don't be selfish about it. Share what you know and let others benefit from it. Also, when in charge over others, like you might be a team leader or the CEO or the CIO or the CFO, whatever your title is, right? Whether at a home where you are the lord of the house, or whether you're in a business sort of, or work environment, whatever power is entrusted to you, you must use that power and be just and kind to all the subjects below you, or the people that are in charge over you. Right? And don't allow power to go into your head, and also don't become abusive in the process of you having this power and others not having power. So even when having the ability to use force in a situation, consider other alternatives first, right? So even the strength of the army, some people have this notion that because we've got the best fighter jets in the world, we must just bomb and bomb and bomb, and we'll bomb everybody into subservience, which maybe it's one tactic of war, but you've got to be strategic in how you do it, and also what kind of reputation are you getting as a result of this inconsiderate bombing and maiming and killing and whatever you're doing to the rest of the world. One day it's going to haunt you, and one day there's also answerability for it. Right, so he saw an inclination in Bilqis towards Islam, and he showed her one miracle, because he got that throne from her kingdom in Sabah, brought by a jinn in a twinkling of an eye, and put in Suleiman's sort of palace. And when she arrived, she was amazed to see that somebody else had a throne exactly like hers. And then she realized it was her own. So she was flabbergasted with that how could that, I just left Yemen maybe a few days back, and how could this throne have sort of come to this place so far away even before I arrived? I mean, this was something, right? And secondly, she was also mesmerized by the fact that she was able to walk over what she, for the first time in her life, saw glass and water under the glass, and as if she had to walk through the water. So she lifted her garment a little bit in order not to wet her feet when she was crossing this. And then she realized actually it doesn't get wet, and it's only glass. So it's the first time glass was also seen probably in human history. But in any case, these were the two miracles, and obviously meeting Sulaiman, she then accepted Islam. The other story is about the jinns who misled people. They used to foretell futures for people and get involved with a whole lot of breaking up of homes and marriages and all the rest of it. So Suleiman stopped this and subdued the jinns, and he made them instead construct useful objects like basins and chambers and bowls like kettles, etc. Then the last thing is before he died, he made a dua for his soul to be removed while seated on his throne and supported by this walking stick that he had in his later days. So when termites had eaten through the staff over time, because he had died now, his body fell down, and only then did the jinns realize that he was dead. And the jinns say that if they knew he was dead, they would have stopped working and ended their subjugation much earlier, probably weeks earlier. From this, we learn that evil jinn do not know the unseen nor the future, and Allah alone knows it, and He shows various, you know, creations of His different things at different times. Right, and what we also learn about is the method taught to us about how to give dawah or the message to other people who don't know Islam. We need to be wise and kind at all times and use the best means possible and available. So here in this ayah, Allah is telling us use hikmah, which is wisdom, mawidat al-hasana, good advice, and jadilhum, in other words, dispute, or if you have to argue or debate, do it in a way which is in a very good way, where you don't try and undermine the other party, you don't denigrate or humiliate their gods or whatever. You do it in a very, very nice, humble way, where you're inviting them, as it were, to a new faith with a new way of life. Right? So when in a position of authority, rule justly, be considerate, and don't abuse your position, and do actions and lead a life that is of benefit to others. And this is what we learn from Sulaiman's life. Okay, we then look at just briefly, this is the Wailing Wall. Now, if you look at this little dome that's sticking out on the right-hand side, this is the Masjid al-Aqsa behind it. And if you look at this level, this is the ground on the top level where the Masjid al-Aqsa is located. So the Wailing Wall is western side of this precinct, and the Masjid al-Aqsa is just barely 200 meters on the other side of the wall. And this is the Jewish quarter. You can see that Israeli flag there. And the wall you can see is in front of you where this little growth of these plants are, where people are standing there and worshipping, and they worship where they bow and they go move forward and backwards and forward and backwards. And also what they do is they write their du'as, whatever they're asking Allah for, they write it on a little small piece of paper and put it in the grooves of the wall. So this is the Wailing Wall. And this bridge that they've built is basically soldiers can, or even people can, when colonial settlers want to storm the Al-Aqsa Mosque, they use this entrance. They use this bridge and they enter from here. And then when they enter on that side, that's when they chase all the Muslims out from all the mosques and clear the way to allow the colonial settlers to do what they want to on the blessed precincts of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Right, then we look at just a quick overview of the Jerusalem map. Now, we know Jerusalem is one of the oldest cities in the world, and in olden times they had walls. There's a long wall that stretches like this and goes right around and goes on the other side as well. So the whole city is surrounded by walls, and there are different entry points. Like here there'll be a gate, there'll be a gate. One is King Herod, one is Damascus Gate, where the Muslims enter. So the Muslims, this is the east side, viewing the scene is from the Mount of Olives. So if you're standing in the precinct of the mosque, if you look to the left when you're looking towards the Qibla, you looking at the Mount of Olives, that little mountain that's overlooking, and this is where this picture is taken. So essentially what's important in this picture for you is this one is the Masjid al-Aqsa, the one of the black dome we saw in the previous picture as well, and the Wailing Wall is just behind there. Then this is the Qubbatus Sakhra, the dome of the rock, as it were, where it's repeated where there's a rock underneath, and it's reported that this is where the Isra, the Mi'raj or the Ascension happened from, with Prophet Muhammad being taken from Masjidul, from Makkah to Jerusalem and then to the seven heavens, and he came back with the gift of Salah to us as the Ummah. Right, so this is essentially the eastern side. So there's four quarters to this particular precinct inside. They've got the Armenian side, the Christian side, the Jewish quarter, and the Muslim quarter. Now the Muslim quarter is this side where all the trees are. in this little bit here. Now it's got narrow gullyways and alleys where people can walk, and traditionally it was only Muslims living in this quarter. What has happened now, and 2 years ago I noticed this new trend, is this area is called Silwan, the suburb. There's already some houses that belong to Muslims that are occupied by colonial settlers. And all they do is they move their family out for whatever reason, sometimes even for no reason, and they simply occupy the house, and then they put up an Israeli flag with cameras right around, and IDF soldiers patrol that area so that they don't get, assaulted or whatever when they're walking in the streets. So what they're doing is they're trying to Judaize or colonize this area of Silwan, which is this one. Then Beit Jala, you've heard of also on the news recently, so right on this side, they're doing the same there. They're occupying one house after the other, after the other. So they started this colonizing of taking over Muslim homes, where they've done now this inside the wall as well. So some of this, the alleyways that we used to walk to go to the mosque, now you see on some alleys you find in between just one house standing with the Israeli flag and cameras, and also, there's another house gone. The settlers have taken over. So with time, they're actually trying to encroach and swallow up everything of the Muslim quarter and the Muslim lands, unfortunately. So they've started this. They're clearing the West Bank now at the moment, bulldozing houses and taking up roads and taking over water wells and just occupying houses. I mean, they're just doing it because they can, and they got the power to do it. And the poor Muslims in the West Bank and Gaza and all over don't have the might and the power to fight back. And unfortunately, the Arab world is asleep. So there's, it's a lot of things happening in Jerusalem. And if you haven't been there, please go quickly while there's still a chance to see the mosque, because you never know. It might just get demolished very soon, and we might not even have a mosque to go to in time to come. So please do visit before it gets too late. Okay, just to talk briefly about Judaism, it's strictly monotheistic in its belief. They believe in one single indivisible God. There are different Jews based on the diaspora, because we talked about the 12 tribes, and they traveled all over and settled all over the world. They eat kosher meats, which is sort of in a halal way, kind of way. But then on the other hand, we have Jews that eat pork as well. And then on the other hand, you even get kosher wines as well. So kosher is not always halal. Let's just be careful. They do fast on different days as well. And they believe that Sabbath is a holy day of the week, which is the Saturday. In terms of the number of Jews in the world, according to Wikipedia, and I don't know how accurate these statistics are, but there are about 7 million Jews in the world. Christians number about 2.4 billion, Muslims about 1.6 billion. So Judaism is one of the smaller of the three Abrahamic faiths, and that's who they are. Right, now, according to the Torah, as well as the Quran, the Jews were asked to do lots of things. They were told to, come into a covenant with Allah, and others believe Him in a certain way, enter the gates bowing humbly, and do not transgress or do things on the Sabbath that you're not supposed to do. And to all this, Allah took a covenant with them, but the Jews unfortunately broke covenant and promise after promise. And we know that during Musa alayhi salam's time already. Right? Then the next verse says they were cursed because they broke the covenant, they disbelieved in the signs of Allah. They also went further to kill the prophets without right. Right? And then they also, on top of it, said our hearts are wrapped in us, we won't believe. But Allah says, no, actually, we seal your heart, so you'll never believe once more. Right, so they believe not except for a few. So you have a few good Jews, but a lot of them are unfortunately not of that type. Then we have also the fact that Isa alayhi salam was sent to the Banu Israel. So he was also one of the prophets that was sent to this group. Right? And obviously coming with a message later than Solomon's time, the Jews were asked to believe even in Isa alayhi salam, but many of them refused to, right? So they never believed in Jesus as a prophet. And they say on the day of the resurrection, he'll be a witness against them, because Isa alayhi salam's message was not accepted by them. Right. And for wrongdoing on their part, we also tested them. We made unlawful for them certain good foods which had been lawful to them, and for averting others from the way of Allah. Now, we know that famous story about the fish, that on the day of Sabbath, the fish used to literally pop out of the water, like, and because the Jews were told you can't fish on the Sabbath, right, or on that Saturday. And on the rest of the week, the fish just disappeared. So, this was like a test to the Jews that even what is halal, and told to you to be halal, sometimes you couldn't access the halal. But what is unlawful, that you'll try and access. So there was this going on as well. But this was just a test. And for taking of usury, the interest, while they had been forbidden from it, and this usury is a big story up to today. Today, who owns the IMF and all the big banks in the world? Unfortunately, these people, they take usury and they build their whole empires on interest and usury, right? And they consume other people's wealth unjustly. So essentially, the Quran also describes many of the Jews that unfortunately fell into the trap of not abiding by what the prophets had preached and taught. And this included even some of the rabbis, unfortunately, who didn't actually accept the ways that they should have. Right? All right, and then all right, I think we'll leave it at that. My time is up, so let's stop at that point. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر